In addition, tax legislation is being updated to better handle petroleum taxation. Objective 7 is to ensure national participation in the oil and gas activities. In this regard, government has concluded a study on the opportunities and challenges for the participation of Ugandans and Ugandan entrepreneurs in this sector. This study, which should be available on the ministry's website during the next week, is going to form the basis for developing a strategy and plan for the better development of Ugandans and the entrepreneurs' participation in this sector. This is not to say that the participation of Ugandans in the sector is awaiting implementation of this study. Many of you are aware that there are quite a lot of Ugandans that have started participating in this sector in terms of high quality employment as petroleum engineers, in terms of high quality contribution, in terms of environment consultants, in terms of service provision through transportation, forwarding and clearing, security services, hospitality, and other aspects like that. But it is recognized that this participation can still be much better and can be done in a more organized way. That's why this study has concentrated on identifying these opportunities so that they can be broadcast and the challenges so that they can be mitigated. Objective 8 is the development and maintenance of national skills and expertise. The initial activities under this objective have been or have included the establishment of the Uganda Petroleum Institute in Kigumba, which was opened in March 2010. This institute is offering diplomas and certificate courses in petroleum-related studies, and the first batch of students from this institute is expected to graduate early next year. A Bachelor of Science degree in Petroleum Geoscience was also started in 2009 at Makerere University, and the university is also preparing to commence a Masters of Science program in Petroleum Geoscience during 2012. As these initial efforts are being taken forward, government is preparing to commission a comprehensive study on the skills requirement for in the entire petroleum value chain. And somebody may come up and say, why didn't this happen first? When I say the entire value chain, I mean the exploration aspects, the production aspects, the refining aspects, and the transportation aspects. You will appreciate that the refining aspects are only being confirmed now after those studies have been undertaken. The feasibility study for refining has demonstrated that it is very economic to do refining. And so now when you are doing a skills study for the country, you do a comprehensive one that also includes refining. And so it's been beneficial to do it after these have been established. Objective 10 is environment protection and biodiversity conservation. I would like to say that in this regard, a multi-institutional monitoring team has been put in place, led by NEMA, including Uganda Wildlife Authority, including the Fisheries Department, including the Water Directorate, and the Department of Petroleum Exploration in the Ministry of Energy. And these institutions are working together to efficiently manage the interface between petroleum and the environment. An environment sensitivity atlas for the Albertine Graben, which is the area where petroleum has been discovered, was developed and completed last year. A strategic environment assessment of these areas is also due to commence later this year. And planning for the development of an oil spill contingency plan for the country has also commenced, and this plan is expected to be completed during next year. Objective 10, Mr. Chairman, is a mutually beneficial relationship between all stakeholders in the sector. Government has commenced implementation of this objective by developing and implementing a national communication strategy for the oil and gas sector in order to bridge the communication gap between the oil and gas industry and the general public. This strategy was developed through a consultative effort, and I know that some of the civil society organizations, some parts of the media also participated in putting together this strategy. This strategy is expected to be launched after it has been submitted to Cabinet. Some parts of it have commenced to be implemented because, as you will all appreciate, the aspect of communicating for the oil and gas sector is more than urgent. Now, in addition to these major policy objectives, the policy also provides for improved land use planning in the areas where petroleum activities are going to be undertaken. In this regard, the Ministry of Lands has declared the Albertine Graben a special planning area, and this was done in 2010. And I'm aware that detailed planning for some of the towns and to-be cities in the area has commenced and is being undertaken. Road infrastructure in the area has also commenced. I am aware that there is one road in the Alberton Graben whose contractor has gone on the ground to start making it a highway. And I'm aware that the other roads are currently under design by the Uganda National Roads Authority. You will appreciate, therefore, that most of the resolutions of Parliament do not represent a significant departure from the general aspirations and framework of the National Oil and Gas Policy. For example, the requirement that the necessary bills are tabled in Parliament within 30 days. I would like to share with you that following the approval of the policy in 2008, and in line with the policy recommendation of formulating a new petroleum law for the country, the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development prepared and submitted principles of this bill to Cabinet. These principles were approved by Cabinet, and Cabinet requested the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs to prepare the draft bills. The first draft of the petroleum bill came out towards the end of 2009, and it was circulated to stakeholders for review and comments. And I know that we received comments from some of you here. A lot of comments were received from both in-country and outside the country. These comments were reviewed and the bill was updated. During the presentation of my ministry's policy statement for the year 2011-2012 to Parliament in August this year, it was agreed with the Natural Resources Committee that this draft bill would be tabled in Parliament by December 2011. You are aware that the resolution was kind of saying that it should be presented in the middle of November, 30 days after the resolution itself. So this is just to show you that some of these resolutions are really in line with the implementation of the policy that was going on. Secondly, in addition to the copies of the production sharing agreements that had previously been laid on the table of Parliament during 2010, my ministry submitted all copies of all existing agreements to the Natural Resources Committee of Parliament in August when the ministry's policy statement was being tabled this year. And this was before the resolutions. And it was agreed then that the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development would hold a workshop with the Committee of Natural Resources and other members of Parliament to discuss the contents of these PSAs, among other things. So this too was actually an ongoing process. The resolutions as passed by Parliament, therefore, tend to represent a bringing forward of the implementation of the policy, and by implication, the governance and development of the petroleum sector in the country. The two arms of government will have to work together to ensure that the development of the sector remains in tandem with the aspirations of this country, and this is especially in connection with the timing of the planned developments that the industry and government had agreed on. And I have no doubt that the two arms of government can definitely address this aspect. And in going forward, and in way of concluding, I wish to share with members that the petroleum sector has the potential to significantly contribute to the development of this country. And this will require that the respective stakeholders in the sector adequately play their roles. These roles will no doubt include supporting the sector, especially at this nascent stage of its development. I wish to conclude by recognizing the role of civil society, and this particular case Accord, for the advocacy role they are continuing to play in the sector. This role is also one of those articulated in the National Oil and Gas Policy and will no doubt contribute to the development of a desirable oil and gas sector for the country. My ministry will continue to support your efforts by participating in these and other engagements when invited, as has indeed been the case in the past. I wish everybody a rewarding participation in this platform, and I thank you again for inviting me to participate for God and my country.
I'm surprised that I've not had really a thunderous clap, because I thought this was a very good presentation and a very good starting point. And I would ask you to do that. Thank you, Commissioner, and in your capacity today as a minister. I think this has been a very good and comprehensive presentation in terms of where we are coming from and where we are going. I want to thank you for also keeping time. You've really done it within time. Colleagues, I don't need to summarize because it has been very, very clear. One, about the policy, what the policy intended to achieve, the set objectives, and the progress that has been made so far. The second point about the resolutions, I think this is not consistent with what has been in the air, because I'm happy to hear that actually the resolutions are actually consistent with the government aspirations, contrary to actually some of the views that actually have been circulating around. And I think that's very, very important. I don't want to preempt the discussion because I already have a panel to do the discussion. I would not also attempt to raise the question because there is a time for the questions. And therefore, I would straight away go on my left and ask Honorable Emmanuel Dombo to give his response. And thereafter, we'll hear from our colleague, Angela Izama, and then we'll open up the discussion. Honorable, you're welcome.
Thank you very much. How do you switch on? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate CORD and the participants for this wonderful platform. I think I've had an opportunity to participate once, but I had since thought that the platform had died until I received this recent invitation for me to come and listen in what exactly is being discussed. Secondly, I want to thank Commissioner Rubondo for the presentation and fundamentally for the statement he made. And when he made that statement, I almost thought that there was no work for discussion, because he believes that in the view of the ministry, there is no serious departure between the objectives and the wishes of the ministry and the aspirations of the resolutions as passed by the members of parliament. I want to tell you that I've had an opportunity to serve as the chairperson of the Natural Resources Committee, especially at the time the policy was developed in 2008. And during that year, I remember the report of the committee which you presented before Parliament made specific anticipations because you had made specific observations in the industry, which we thought, if not cured early, they could easily breach or bring a problem in the sector. For instance, I'll tell you this. The oil industry was paying exorbitantly to their staff, who were working in partnership with our staff of the ministry, who were poorly paid. And the staff of the ministry had to verify the costs and also capitalize the figures that would later be used for recovery of the investment costs in the area. We saw this anomaly, and it was an area which could easily be exploited, given what is happening in the media right now. I want to state that at the time when I was there, the young men and women in the oil industry looked very hardworking and very honest, and they appeared to be beyond reproach. But this was an area which was so vulnerable that somebody could easily manipulate these young men and women with some few dollars for them to capitalize costs in a heavy manner. We did recommend, therefore, at that time, that the management of the oil sector should be transformed so that the technical staff in the sector should not be treated as ordinary civil servants, because the pay structure in government is determined by the Ministry of Civil Public Service. And you know the scales, you want to use something. But the oil industry, when you look at the mega money that they were paying to these young people and the potential for corruption, it was a very, very potential area, and we did make specific recommendations which we thought government would look at. Let me tell you this, that for us as parliament, if you look at your constitution, number one function of parliament is to make laws for the good governance, for the development, for whatever in this country. And whereas we were very grateful to His Excellency the President when he invited us for a prayer breakfast or praying for oil, we thought we could have been better utilized as members of parliament to make laws to govern the sector. Praying is good, we can pray, but we progressively saw that a lot of commitment was being made without a legal framework. Now, the question was, if agreements have been made with the two consenting parties, and then a legal regime comes in later, what supersedes the other? And this is exactly what is bringing the arbitration which is in London. The two parties sat and made an agreement. But now, there is a legal framework. So, does the agreement between two parties supersede the provisions of a law if it is there or if it is not there? Two, if you read about the oil industry, there are basically two cases. There are cases that have been successful, and there are cases that have been a failure. And these are many in the industry. And when Mr. Rubondo talks about the consultations about the legal framework and the kind, this is true. But is Uganda going to reinvent the wheel? There are so many good examples. You and your team have been to Norway. I have been to Norway too. And we see exactly what is happening. And we know the structure that we are taking now is almost a replica of what is happening in Norway, but with a few modifications. The question is, how do you approve national policy, gas and oil policy, in 2008? Now it's 2011. A lot of commitments and investment is being made, and we are still promising the legal framework. We are still promising the law. In the debate, it was made clear that in the UPC government, before even the first agreement for exploration would be signed, which was almost signed before the government was overthrown, first of all, government had to make a law. The first oil and gas exploration act was made by the previous regime, the UPC regime. It is not a current law. It is a law which was just being amended. So if previous governments did anticipate and put a legal framework in place in anticipation of exploration, can't we expedite our legal process now that we are even going into heavier areas of exploration, of discovery, of production, of production and the refinery?